In this video, I will explain what pronouns are. Pronouns replace nouns, and so they are words that take the place of the name of people, the name of a particular object, or the name of a particular place. What does this look like in practice? Here is an example of a sentence. Daniel is a big fan of Daniel's room. Now this works grammatically, but it feels a little bit clunky to say Daniel's room, and so we can replace Daniel's with the pronoun his to say Daniel is a big fan of his room, and it feels as though it reads a lot better than the first sentence because we're not having to repeat Daniel, but instead we use the pronoun to point us towards the exact same information. Here is an expansion of that example. Daniel is a big fan of his room. Daniel likes to invite his friends to play games in his room. Now again, grammatically, this works, but it is not the best writing, and we can use pronouns to improve it. So, firstly, let's replace the second Daniel with he. It is obvious that the he refers to Daniel because we have just made a statement about Daniel being a big fan of his room, and so the he can't refer to any other person in that context, and so therefore there is no need to actually use Daniel's name again and for the writing to sound quite repetitive. We can also change the final phrase in the second sentence because we're repeating his room from the first sentence, and so we can use the pronoun their, which means that this now reads, Daniel is a big fan of his room. He likes to invite his friends to play games there. Now, if we hadn't mentioned his room in the first sentence, the pronoun there would actually make no sense. We wouldn't know where we were referring to. But because we have just mentioned a particular place, it makes sense to then use the pronoun to replace the noun rather than repeating the noun. Here are different forms of pronouns in this table. We use terms such as first, second, or third person to identify the form of the pronoun. And so I, me, my, and mine, the first row of our table here, would all be examples of first person singular pronouns. They are all saying what I, the main speaker and person doing the action, is in terms of my role in the sentence, and there was only one of me. You, your, and yours are examples of second person singular pronouns. So I'm now talking or writing about you. I'm often directing my words to a particular person. And I've again said this is singular because I'm assuming there is only one person I'm directing this to. He, him, his, she, her, hers, it, its, all examples of third person singular pronouns. So this is where I'm not the one involved, and you're not the one involved, but I'm writing as a detached narrator, or I'm talking about other people in a conversation. I use these third person pronouns to refer to whether they are male, female, or whether it is a particular object or place. And then for the final three rows, we have exactly the same structure, but this time we have plural. We, us, our, and ours are examples of first person plural pronouns because there's now more than one of me involved. You, your, yours, while being identical wording to the row above, would now be second person plural pronouns because we're talking about more than just one individual. This does mean that it can be quite hard to determine when we look at writing on a page whether somebody is using that word to refer to one or more people, and so you'd normally need to look at the context to try and determine which it is. And then finally, they, them, their, and theirs would be examples of third person plural pronouns. And you can see that there's only one row for that as opposed to the three for the singulars, because we use those collective pronouns to refer to a big group of people rather than distinguishing by gender as we did with singular. Here is an example of two sentences using a few of those forms of pronouns. First of all, Daniel is a big fan of his room. We have the third person singular pronoun his replacing Daniel's so that we don't repeat Daniel's name. Secondly, we all enjoy visiting his house. We use the first person plural pronoun we rather than listing the names of all of us who are involved in the enjoyment of visiting his house. Thirdly, use the third person singular pronoun his rather than saying Daniel's house because it is clear from the connection to the first sentence that we are still talking about Daniel, and so there's no need to repeat his name. And fourthly, we use the second person singular or plural pronoun you to talk about you always being sure of a warm welcome. Now, I said singular or plural here because we can't know for certain whether there is only one other person or whether we're talking to a broader audience. I think it's most likely in this context that the you is plural, but technically both are possible in that example. And so, pronouns replace nouns.